From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
I, Prophet of Esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of Esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the Prophet and William as the Professor.
The Business of Esports podcast is sponsored by Esports Entertainment Group, a leading esports and online gambling company. For more information, go check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I am Paul Dewalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, William Collis. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you for all the love you give the podcast. If you haven't already, go buy William's book, The Book of Esports. Leave a review on Amazon. Tell him how much you loved it. It would mean a lot to us. Also, make sure, guys, and I know, because I know some of you have already bought a bunch of merch, but if you haven't already, go buy some Business of Esports socks or hoodies or shirts. It's a great way to support the podcast, and the merch, I promise, is very cool, very fun. You can still get Professor t-shirts, and you can still get Prophet t-shirts if that's what you like. But the socks are my recommendation. Socks and hoodies, I think, are always the safe bet. William, how's it going? How's your week?
Super great, Paul. As always, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, particularly after my hiatus last week. I think that's the first time I ever didn't do a Business of Esports podcast in like a year and a half or something.
We missed you. It was a good episode.
It was a good episode. It was a good episode. But yeah, I mean, it would have been better if I'd been there. I don't know. Can I say that? Like, is that am I allowed? I don't know. Yeah.
Jimmy did a great job in your shoes, I will say. But we missed you.
I know.
And it's great to have you back this week.
If I could have moved that Heroes of the Storm tournament for anything, like I would have.
That was your big shot, and I understood.
I had to be there. They said we rely on you as the Vala carry, and you know what I said? I said, get on my back because we're going to the championship.
That's it. You already had the jersey on. You were ready. Yeah. I mean, I know you've been ready for the last 5 years?
Yeah, for 5, and maybe we did lose in round 1, and maybe we won the whole thing. Who's to say? Who's to really know? We don't even need to discuss that part, right? What matters is you played. Yeah. By the way, for listeners, this is all a joke. There was no Here's the Storm tournament I was playing in, but there should have been. There should have been.
Yeah. We have actually. There is side note. There is Heroes of the Storm news this week. Believe it or not, we probably won't get to it on the podcast.
Oh, really?
But we may get to it on the live stream. And I actually had some fans who watched the live stream remind me to plug it because I think a lot of the podcast listeners maybe don't know, or sometimes I forget to plug it. Guys, after we do the podcast, when we record it on Wednesdays, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesdays, we do a live stream. We cover all the topics that didn't fit into the podcast, and it's a lot of fun. It's interactive. We get to do it with you guys. So if you're a listener of the podcast, come check out the live stream, and I encourage everyone to participate.
I really just have to say shameless plug, guys. Like, if you listen to this at all, like, just stop by. Even for 5 minutes, I promise you'll enjoy it. Drop something in the chat. It's really interactive. Like, if you're playing this on, whatever, your Apple or your Pocket Casts or whatever right now, like, and you bother enough to listen to the podcast, like, it's worth it. Stop by. Trust me. It's like a great time, and it makes the show that I think feels very, I guess insightful, but abstract. It makes it really real. Like, it shows that we're real people, and it's a fun time. And again, we do lots of great bonus topics. It's a little more casual, a little sillier, but still the same level of analysis and, commitment. So stop by. It's awesome.
And I will say, William, part of me obviously doesn't want to talk about Heroes of the Storm, but we will get to it on the live stream. The reason we don't have time on the podcast today is we have an amazing guest, none other than Zack Johnson, the CEO of ggCircuit. and fellow sort of compatriot with you, William, in this latest acquisition by Esports Entertainment Group. But Zach, welcome to the Business of Esports podcast.
Thank you for having me. And for those listening that can't see the video, I ordered up a batch of Indiana Sunshine to blaze into my face as we talk on camera together. So that's just special for you two.
That is. It's only the people who watch us on video are going to get that. And unfortunately, I mean, I don't know why. It could be. William and I are both such, models. I don't understand why the audio version gets like 1,000 times the audience of the audio version of the video version, but probably because they're just so jealous of all of our good looks, I guess. But Zach, look, incredible business you have in ggCircuit. For those of you who are listening that maybe don't know, like for our audience that maybe doesn't heard of ggCircuit, hasn't heard of Zack Johnson, could you give them a bit of the background on you, how you got into gaming, what you're focused on now, what ggCircuit's business is all about, what you're excited about going forward, things like that. Just some of the background story.
Yeah, I'm tempted to give you the, so for season 2 of Shark Tank, I was selected as one of the 45 finalists to fly out to LA and film. And they were trying to decide on whether they're going to have Cuban or Foxworthy on the panel. This was after their first pilot season that was successful. And so I had a really good elevator pitch, and this was in 2010. And so when you asked me to introduce everything, I thought, could I give that? But it's still the same. It's a little bit the same as, as a collegiate athlete here in Indiana. Guess what I played? You guessed it, basketball. And I loved competition. And after I finished at the collegiate level, I wasn't good enough to go pro, and video games gave me some of that feeling of getting in a bracket and going to a weekend tournament. And this is many years ago. We'll just leave it at that. Many, many years ago. So we started running video game tournaments as youth pastors in our church in the basement. We'd have all of these folks bring in the original Xbox. We'd LAN them together for Halo. And then all of these really good Halo players started showing up at our church. And I'm like, this is kind of cool. We should do this more often. And I'm also tired of carrying CRT TVs in and out of the church basement every weekend. Because the 25-inch, 27-inch TV, a CRT TV is not light. So we opened up a little, and back then we called it a LAN cafe or an internet cafe or a cyber cafe. And that store, eBash, has been open since 2004. So
wow.
We've been holding tournaments, and for anybody that's old, like we used to have the Ogre twins show up for tournaments at our store back in the day. We were the Midwest spot for all the folks in Ohio and Indiana and Michigan and Illinois and Kentucky to find a LAN tournament where we paid out a whopping $1,000, for payouts. And all these folks would come in big brackets, and it was just awesome. And it really grew to the point where we started, we built a second store and had some folks interested in helping us franchise, and just got to the point where we needed to automate it. And, like we realized to make these things scale and to run these things, I can't be everywhere at once. And so we needed software to really control the whole thing. And that's really when I met up with my partner in ggCircuit, Chris McGee. He was running a chain of LAN centers in Ireland called Game the World. They had 17 of them. We had 4 of them in Indiana, and we just started combining to write software. Their team wrote it, and I managed it for everybody in the U.S. And then 2008 hit, and his business was hit hard in Ireland, and we took a year or two and just ran our stores and came back together in 2012 as it started to pick up again, and thought, let's start doing it again. And this time, let's really write an operating system that runs all of this, and not just a web portal that integrates databases together online. Let's really make a cloud-based system from the ground up to do all this. So that's when some of our software was born, and that's what ggCircuit does. We're the industry, this is our tagline, but we're the industry leader in software services and support for esports venues, specifically venues. That's what we care about. So, to be able to control the screen for the player, for the business owner, and automate as much as possible, that's our bread and butter.
Very interesting, Zach. And look, I love, anyone who's listened to the podcast long enough knows how much I love these kinds of infrastructure plays around gaming, much more than, some of the flashier sort of pieces of the ecosystem. This is sort of the nuts and bolts, and people maybe call this boring, but to me, these are the really interesting businesses because they're the ones that tend to make money. And And I'm just curious, like, where do you see that LAN center business going? Because your business is so tied to that, right? At what point did you decide we don't want to open more of our own? We just want to be sort of this operating system. But and sort of I'm maybe asking this question the wrong way, but in some ways I'm trying to figure out, you decided at some point you wanted to be the operating system, which means you believed that LAN centers were going to explode probably, right? And you were going to get many more of them. At any point did you think we should be in that business as well? Or like, how did that decision to stay just the infrastructure play happen?
Yeah. So honestly, like for me as a good old Midwest boy, and again, as a son of a preacher, like I care about people. And one of my problems was, as we ran all these tournaments in 2007, 8, 9, 10, with all these LAN centers connecting together for, just a League of Legends tournament towards the end of that decade, or before then it was console games and a lot of Counter-Strike, probably Source. It was 1.6 in the beginning, but then it was Source most of the busier years. We just saw our friends that would open up stores everywhere, make it a few years, and then they would just disappear and couldn't keep the lights on. And that bothered me because I know that this business is successful and I know it can be successful. And I knew it was a matter of scale, but it was not a matter of scale of any one company building 500 locations as much as like, how do we get all these folks to work together in a different way so that as a group, we could go to the publishers and work on a deal together. And remind me, and I'll share a story of how that ties into my relationship with the folks at Epic and our Fortnite tournaments we ran back in the early days. But, like, how do we take our big giant group and say, listen, Mr. Activision or Mr. EA, or I don't know, it has to be Mr., but Mrs. Fortnite or Mrs. Epic, we can provide you access to thousands of locations with millions of gamers if you work with us, right? So that's really what it wasn't that I saw that LAN centers were going to be awesome. I just saw a lot of LAN centers open. And that's why we really got into a lot of services as well, as they would come to us and say, how did you make it 5 years? Or how'd you make it 3 years? Or how'd you make it 10 years? And now 17 plus years later, how have you made it that long? And, we just share simple things with them. Like if you only have $75 on your credit card and you want to open a gaming center, I always say, like, just go take out like 30,000 and bring it to my house and we'll burn it. And then you'll save the other 35,000 and you'll only have burnt 30,000, right? Like you have no business opening one of these for 75,000 because it has to scale. It has to have 40 plus stations, or on Friday night, a group of 5 friends show up. And it doesn't matter if you have 5 stations, if there's not 5 next to each other, they're not going to stay in your venue for Friday night, right? Like you have to have enough seats that you can move folks around on the busiest times. That's why movie theaters have 300 seats and they have 8, 12 screens for Star Wars opening weekend, right? Like it's not because the Tuesday night that you go there and you're like, this is a waste of money, I have almost the whole theater to myself. It's because they can pack that baby on opening night for a lot of their big shows. And that's where you really, pick up the revenue. So a lot of it was just my passion for the industry and the people that are starting these things and trying to make them successful. We say sometimes in spite of themselves, just because they just didn't have the wherewithal to plan ahead to, okay, I can make enough money to keep the lights on for 3 years, but then I got to put new graphics cards in my PCs. How do I do that at the end of 3 years? We're like, well, guess what? You got to make more than keeping the lights on for 3 years so you can buy the graphic cards to put back in your PCs in 3 years. So that's kind of some of that.
But the insight that you have from the ggCircuit software, right? Did that not embolden you in some way to maybe say, hey, we have 5 or 4 successful centers in Indiana. Why don't we go open 40 more? Right? Like, why did you, I'm curious why you consciously never went down that path.
Yeah. So the one thing that we've still yet to figure out, and, Mike Sepso is a friend of mine that's starting up Vindex, and we've talked about this many times. And a lot of folks out there, like I know John Fazio and what Nerd Street's doing. Like, again, people matter. People are the biggest secret ingredient in all of this. And there's a shortage of folks out there that can step up and run these with the passion that you really need, because it takes a unique individual right now and somebody with a little bit of experience. And there's just not that many opportunities to build that pool of personnel, right? So the biggest thing for me was we started doing franchising, and it was okay for a little bit, but I would find franchisees were passionate about gaming, but not passionate about running the business. So, like I'll tell you a quick story. We had one of our first franchisees was a huge, I forget the name of it. What was before League of Legends? What was the
Dota?
No, the other one that was.
Heroes of New Earth.
Heroes of New Earth. He was a big Heroes of New Earth player.
See,
Good job.
see,
The
professor coming out here.
So Heroes of New Earth, was actually big before League launched, and Heroes of New Earth was kind of like it was the pioneer for League, but it charged $20 or $30 to buy the game, and League of Legends came out and it was free to play. So Heroes of New Earth was big. He was a big Heroes of New Earth player, and he would run tournaments at his store, and he would play in them. And we didn't find this out till a year or two later, but like there were folks that got banned from the store when they were on a team that would knock him out of a tournament because he would get angry at them. And, again, that fine line between your passion for gaming and your passion for running a business, like that's a hard line to hold because you're caught up in the moment of competition. Not that he was wrong for getting mad or whatever, but you can't kick people out of your store for beating you in a tournament, right?
Well, I don't know, William. You may open one, right? Just for Heroes of the Storm.
I mean, that's
you'd kick people
I'm
out,
thinking
right?
that, you're basically telling me I can guarantee I win.
Yes.
If I open a store and kick people out who beat me.
He would be his bracket would be that. Well, there's someone who got a bye to the finals. Oh, it's my team. Ran drawing. Guess what?
How did that happen? Oh, and there's a disqualification of my competitors. Oh dear. Well, this has happened every week for the past 6 months. What are the odds?
Another thing, Paul, too, that reminds me of what we're talking about. We've always struggled with. We love competition. We love bracketed play, but it was pretty early on that we discovered that if your payout and your prizes and your rewards are the top 3 places in a tournament, right? Like in this, we found this out with Gears of War when it came out. We ran a bunch of Gears of War tournaments. Had eventual tons of pros come through our thing that went on to win almost all the MLG events, right? But I would hold these Gears tournaments and we'd have 8 teams show up, then we'd have 16, and then we'd have 32. And then all of a sudden they would start going back down again because the experience for a team or a player that shows up and gives it everything they've got and they finish 5th place and the first 3 places pay out money, like unfortunately they feel like a loser. Right? Like they felt like they lost. And I didn't like that part of it. So that was one of the things we really focused on with our software with ggCircuit is like, as you play in our center, I don't know how detailed you want me to be, but you earn coins as you play, like you would tickets at Chuck E. Cheese, right? Like if you're terrible at skee ball, Paul's shaking his head like I can tell he's terrible at skee ball. You can hit enough.
No, that was my favorite part was collecting on those skee ball tickets. I mean,
right,
that was
you
my
get
favorite
enough
part.
tickets eventually to go get the spinning top, like everybody wins a prize. And as corny as that is, that makes the event fun, right? Like you didn't leave Chuck E. Cheese like, oh, I sucked at skee ball today, man. I had a really down day at skee ball. You're like, dude, it was a party. We had a good time. I really got to play some fun games. And I went home with a slap bracelet, like sweet, You felt like a winner. And so we're trying to do that with some of our systems in that everybody has a chance to play. Like, I'll give you another thing. We haven't announced this yet, but for my LAN center, we've been mining Ethereum pre-ggCircuit crypto project, right? So like I have a wallet with almost 6 Ethereum coins in it that we're not sure, like our accountant's like, how do you get that in your, and you're like, we're like, I have a better idea. We're going to let everybody earn coins, and we have a thing called the Wheel of Win, and we're just going to spin the wheel, and every month we're going to give away an Ethereum coin to one lucky winner.
Wow.
And every coin you earn is an entry in the drawing, and our software tracks all that. And we're like, so from July to December, coming out of the pandemic at my store, one winner will win an Ethereum coin every month. And my accountant's like, hallelujah, doesn't have to pass through the checkbook and goes off as a prize, and they can deal with cashing it out and paying the taxes on it on the other side of their wallet. So things like that to me are the way that I love to think of competitions and ways for folks to play that doesn't necessarily mean one person wins or the best person wins, right? Like,
I just want to dive a bit deeper on this because a lot of the questions, at least I get from people who listen to the podcast or come on the live stream, I find there's a lot of people interested in this LAN center market, right? And anyone who wants to be sort of an esports entrepreneur going and opening a LAN center feels like one of the easiest ways to get in. And so I see a lot of people interested in this space, my question to you is, knowing what you know, given, the 17 years and all the data and insight you have from the software, is there anything you can point to that says this is the thing that makes LAN centers successful, or the thing that makes LAN centers unsuccessful? Like, are there key things that you could point to that are indicators of success or failure?
Yeah, we actually did a YouTube series 10 years ago that still gets a lot of views because people search for 10 biggest mistakes in a LAN center or something. I forget the title. I should know it. Like, I'm a terrible marketer of my own company, but we have a ggCircuit YouTube channel with all these helpful videos, and we've recorded them over, I don't even know how many years we've recorded them at this stage. So one of the biggest things I see is the battle with real estate. And right now, coming out of the pandemic, I hate to be like a total optimist, but it's a great time to start a gaming center right now, or esports venue, LAN center, whatever you want to call it, because I've seen a lot of folks even that have been in business renegotiating their leases now on like a percentage-based lease, or a lot better lease than they've had in the past. So your three biggest costs as a LAN center is the capitalization of all the equipment. Now you're going to pay for that, right? Like, you can't just say, I'm going to write a check and then it's going to go away. Like, you need to depreciate it or save up enough money so that in 3 to 5 years you can buy it again. That's one. Second one is payroll. So you need it to be as automated as possible. You don't want to have 15 like technical gurus running around like trying to write scripts for you and auto log. Like, you just need the software to work. And the other piece of it is the rent. That's the three biggest things to running a gaming center, right? Like, my rent in my little 4,000 square foot store is $5,100 a month. Like, it's brutal. Like, it's a giant check to write every month. So right now, it's a great time. We've negotiated our lease down to $2,800 a month with our landlord because of COVID. And, there's no indication that we have to raise that back up in the near future. And so we'll probably go to them and say, how about a percentage-based rent now, where there's a base fee and then you get a percentage of our gross sales? Because we're very cyclical, Paul. Like, 17 years worth of eBash drafts, I could put them on top of each other, and it's like the waves of the ocean every year. Like, everyone goes back to school. September is always the lowest month. Like, everyone's going to get straight A's, and their kids are not allowed to go back to the LAN center, and they spend all their money on new shoes. And like, every year it's down, and then it creeps up as game releases come out in October and November. And then in Indiana, everybody's inside in the winter because it's cold. In December and January and February are baller. Then it gets warm out and everybody goes back in and it goes down a little bit. So, we know that kind of cyclical thing. So it'd be great if our lease, kind of flowed with that cash flow.
Interesting. And do you think, as a consequence of sort of that lease piece or that rent piece being that much more affordable because of the pandemic, do you think we will see an explosion of LAN centers? Is that, something that people couldn't expect? Will we see, and what number would you put on that? Like, are we going to see 1,000 open in the US in the next 12 or 24 months, 2,000, 5,000? Like, what is the number you think that where it becomes saturated and there's just no more opportunity to open more centers here?
Yeah, it's funny, but like, if we talk about LAN centers in general, there's a lot more LAN centers than people realize, right? Like, so it depends on what you call a LAN center, gaming center. So, we have gaming stations inside of Best Buy stores in the US. Nobody would have any idea, but Alienware kiosks and 700 Best Buy stores, you can test out Project Cars on the systems, and that's running our software. You can actually play Project Cars. It's connected to the internet. That's our software running those stations. And we're talking with other folks about gamifying that into leaderboards and giving away hardware inside of a Best Buy store. So is that a gaming center? Absolutely not. It's a retail store, right? But that's an install of ours. We power a lot of universities, and now high schools are building dedicated spaces inside of those. It's another whole market, right? But you'd be surprised how many folks, like, in their laser tag arena have like 20 gaming stations in a corner, or, like, they've got a Magic card shop, right? But they've also got like 20 PCs in the room next to them that they do little LAN parties in, and they run our software. So I think there's going to be a lot of those. I don't know. We signed up 30 demos last week, and that's the highest number we've ever had in our history for a single week. Wow. Those are folks that, like, they have to talk to us. We set up a demo server. They log into the demo server and they start testing the software. So, like, as we talk about sales funnels, we get about 100 and some leads a week. 30 demo startups is a lot. Like, we've added
huge conversion.
We've added 1,100 screens in the last 4 weeks to our network. Like, Part of it is people opening back up, but a lot of them are brand new centers coming on board. And again, the combination of Helix and Genji, and I'll be careful I don't boost William's confidence too much here, because we'll watch his face and see if he glows a little more. But the ggCircuit Helix Genji combo of like the ggCrypto project, we're finding ways to deliver revenue to these stores that they didn't have before, and their costs don't change much, right? So for a little more electricity, while your gamers are not logged in, we use distributed computing. We call it ggFuse, which happens to be mining Ethereum right now. And it's generating, like, we had a LAN center in Chicago get a $5,000 check from us for the first 2 weeks. So it's $10,000 a month they're going to get from us by allowing us to use their PCs for processing, which right now is mining Ethereum. And we wrote them a $5,400 check for the first 2 weeks. And I love it, because you know what we're doing? We're helping those business owners generate revenue from their machines when there is not a gamer sitting there.
Yeah, it solves that like keeping seats occupied problem, right? Which is the crux of the business model for these centers, right? They need to maintain some, 80% or 70% capacity for however many days, however they've modeled it. I assume this completely flips that around, and now those numbers come way down, right?
Well,
you could have
about
centers.
My three costs, right? Like, so payroll doesn't go up, rent doesn't go up, and the capitalization doesn't go up, right? Like the utilities are as scared as everybody is. And I know that the cost of electricity is different around the world, but to give you an idea, my gaming center's electricity is $1,000 a month before we started doing crypto. And now it's like $1,300 a month. Like it's nothing. It's nothing in addition to what I was already heating and cooling the space. Like, I don't know if you know this, but a heated match between Paul and William in Heroes of the Storm generates some body heat, right? There's a lot of trash talking, and so the air conditioning's got to cool that down a little bit, just the same as it cools down mining some crypto when you're not sitting in the chair. So it's surprisingly not that much different.
Interesting. Very interesting. William, I don't know if you had any questions.
Well, it's tough for me because, Zach and I are effectively coworkers who have known each other for a long time. So I'm very familiar with and I'm enamored by the business. I think what Zach has built is just absolutely incredible. I will just say, I don't know, is it useful maybe, Zach, to say like, what are the, I still get the sense that, I think you did a good job of explaining, but like, there's this misconception about LAN centers as sort of these like businesses that have like, we had them in the 90s, when like VR was first a thing and you'd go in and it was like pixelated, and like, that was like before there were really, the home console market had really heated up. Like there's that. And I just think it's helpful. Like, can you just describe for people, like, cause you've seen so many, literally thousands of gaming centers, all around the world, right? Like, can you just say more about like, I guess like the modern experience across this customer? Cause I want people to kind of understand, like, this is really a new thing. You know what I mean? It's like, this isn't some people trying to make a throwback trend work. This is actually a real pivotal way that many gamers engage in esports and gaming more broadly.
Yeah. A lot of times when we're starting with clients and, it's strange as they come to us, like whether it's a person that's opening up 50 stations in a strip mall, or it's somebody like Esports Arena in Vegas or Fortress down in Australia, or these giant centers as we're working with them. If they don't already have this, one of the first things we do with them is like, what is your purpose? Like, what is the theme of your center and your space? Like, so back in the day, people didn't have high speed at home. So they went to a gaming center to have lower ping, right? Like I see a lot of folks that are like, you know what, our LAN center's purpose, we're going to have the fastest PCs out there. And immediately I'm like, hold on. Like, that sounds awesome. But let me tell you why that's not going to work. Because you know what happens in 3 months or 6 months? They're going to come in and you no longer have the fastest ones, and you're not going to want to buy all new PCs in 6 months to keep saying that, right? Like, so be careful, like making the purpose of your center, trying to be the latest and greatest technology. It's got to have a different theme or purpose. So I love Battle and Brew in Atlanta, right? Like, they've been around as long as we have, like 15 plus years. And theirs is really like this cool, like nerdy, geeky bar atmosphere with really unique food that's named after a bunch of gaming stuff. They have a full kitchen. Like, they're way more restaurant and bar than they are gaming center, but they've got, I don't even know, like 40 stations in there. They've got couch stations to play console on, and then they've got like a bunch of PC stations to play League or, Heroes of the Storm if you want to on.
Yeah,
So-
that's what everyone is playing there, Zach.
Right, that's
so
probably
just
the
to be
number
clear.
one game there. We all know that, but
I
again,
mean, you don't even have to look up stats at this point in any center. Everywhere
right.
it would be.
It's
top
pretty
of
much
the-
the number one game always.
Yeah.
Like, anyone who's just picking this show up is going to be so confused if they just hear some of this.
I know they just come in there now and we're like, wow, that game's really made a comeback.
They're like, we saw 8 new downloads from all the viewers, right? No, I'm kidding. So there's always these other centers that have good ideas, but then there's the ones that just think it's not Field of Dreams, right? Like if you build it, they will come. Like you have to run it like you would run a normal business. If you open a Subway franchise, there is some brain recognition of someone driving down the road, seeing the sign to come there. But every franchisee is required by the franchisor to have a marketing budget and put a bunch of commercials on TV, radio, social media, wherever they can put it to let them know, go to the new Subway that opened, right? Like make sure you go to our store. And that's what we tell folks, like you still have to market it. You have to go to all of the events at Chamber of Commerce or the events at high schools and try to sponsor events where you show up and run a little mini Smash tournament and hand out free 1-hour cards for your store. Like you've always got to be out there hustling for your business. And I just unfortunately see a lot of these folks start up and they just think people need a place to raid in World of Warcraft and I'm going to build that for them. And I'm like, cool. Now, how are you going to go find all of those people in their basements raiding World of Warcraft to come to your store, right? Like, it just doesn't magically appear because they're probably playing with folks in another state that don't even talk about your store. So you got to go out and get them and bring them into your store and give them a reason to come in there. So theme is always a big one for me.
Can I ask a question, Zach, about how you guys position yourself in the market? Like I love this idea of the operating system for LAN centers, right? I kind of love that as a tagline. And if I'm thinking about operating systems, for the most part, other than, more specific use cases, Windows has dominated the market, right? For the last 10 years at least, right? And do you see this infrastructure layer, this operating system for LAN centers as somewhat of a winner take all kind of market? Or do you see, 4 competitors to ggCircuit thriving in the next, 10 years or 20 years or whatever it is? Like, are there advantages to being in every center for the centers also, right? Because they learn maybe from the others, you guys collect all this data, so is it a winner take all market in your mind?
Yeah, I'll use this as an example with William again, because so we have a few clients that are concerned using us because of the fear that data rules all, right? Like, so there's this fear that the data is valuable, which it is, all right? Like the data is extremely valuable, but we're not, and William knows this because even as our sister company and now as our partner, like we're all one family, like we're still very, very protective of every one of our customers' data, right? Like to the point, like universities that use our system, we have SSO set up where the university users just token us through APIs to get authenticated. We ask for an answer. They say yes. We don't know who they are, what they're doing, or anything else. And like we'll track statistics for that UUID, that generic ID, and throw it back to them. And they can throw it on a leaderboard in their university. And no one has any idea who that player is. And it's more for robust troubleshooting of bug tracking and everything else for us than the value of the data. Like we don't sell panels on screens to sponsors for anything. Like everyone immediately jumps into that and they're like, oh my gosh, you've got tens of thousands of screens. Let's throw a Coca-Cola ad on there and you can make all of your stores a bunch of money. And I'm like, no. Like, so that is a problem for us, is that there are good friends of mine that run chains of LAN centers that do not use our software because they want to make sure that they're very conscious of their data and their players and their platform. And for me, platform is a terrible word. I hate when people use it because to me, it's the purpose, right? Like platform to me means what do your gamers do? Because like I can build an app or I can build a website or I can build software. Like, so, everybody loves to use the word platform, but like what you mean is like, what's your business idea and how you keep your players interacting with your brand and your business idea. That's what you mean by platform, right? And we're 100% transparent. Like all of these folks, I try to convince them like, we're not, but again, it's a very, very, like they've gone to their investors and raised money on their model of we're going to build out 500 stores and we're going to control all of our stores, and we don't want to control their stores at all. We just want to make it where instead of building 20 stores this year, you can build 50. And instead of controlling 50 stores with 5 people, you control 50 stores with 1 person, right? Like, we're trying to make it scale and automated. So let me be nerdy for a little bit if I can, right? So
Yeah.
One of the things that we're the most proud of is a very, very old fashioned thought of the fact that in our LAN centers, we have a product called ggRock. Okay. So what ggRock is that it's a server that is located on that local network, and it contains an image that all of the gaming PCs in that network can boot off of. So in the BIOS, as it boots up, it says, do I have a hard drive? And we say no. And we take the hard drive out. We say, no, here's your hard drive. And we send them to that server on the network. That server's like, cool, I know who you are by your MAC address. I'm going to give you an IP. Go ahead and boot up. And it boots on an image that's the same image that PC 2, 3, 4, and 5 boot up with, right? So we love that product. And there's nobody in the world that should not use that product. It literally has nothing with player data, nothing with anything else. Like, everybody should use that product. But not everybody does, because the fear is, I always take it back to my ISP days, like, if you know more than me or I don't quite understand how it works, then I don't trust you. And I hate that, because like, I'm like, guys, like, I don't know how to be more transparent than, like, literally we'll put the code on your server and show you how the code works and teach you how to use it, and you can use it, right? Like, and you can go install it in another center of yours and just make your life so much easier. I don't know, Paul, we used to boot up 250 PCs for Gen Con every year in the esports room, right? Like, we were gurus at writing images and copying images to all the hard drives. Like, and there's a ton of smart people out there today that'll go build a bunch of LAN centers like, oh, I know how to image hard drives. Like, it's super awesome. And now I'm like, no, you have a Pixie boot server that boots all 250 of those PCs off of one image, right? Like, and if there's a Fortnite update the night before the show opens, you're like, no sweat, I just update the image, and then I turn them all on and they all boot from. I don't have to transfer anything to them. They don't have hard drives in them. And it doesn't affect gaming at all, because it still uses all the machine's hardware for gaming. It loads the game in the local RAM. It uses the graphics card. It uses all of the stuff on the PC. Like, it's not a thin client or VMware, right? Like, it's a gaming PC that just has a virtual hard drive on a server. It's brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. My team is amazing at this product. And why in the world is not everybody using that? There are chains that have 20 locations inside of retail big brand box stores that tried this out, didn't quite understand how it worked, were scared because they didn't know how it worked, and they just said, no, thank you. And they use deep freeze to freeze the image of all their PCs in 20 locations, and it's a miserable nightmare for them to maintain those images.
Interesting. I come back to my question, Zach, though, then. Do you think this is winner take all?
I'm offended that everybody doesn't use our stuff, because it
as you should be.
There's no reason to not use it. Our GG Leap software has 60 million hours of usage. 60 million hours of usage. And every single day, every day, something is found that needs to be tweaked. Every day. It'll never be finished. And anybody that can build something and thinks, oh, this is easy, I'll build it, it will never be finished. Was it Activision Blizzard this week updated their launcher and updated a few things inside of their screens, and we had to go in and make a fix for that, right? Like, and it's no big deal for us because we have an awesome team of developers, and we fix it within less than a day. We have a patch out and everybody's good. Like, do you want to run a software company, Mr. Esports Center owner, or do you want to run the next greatest esports center business, right? Like,
yep.
That's why I think everybody should use it. There are other folks that build software for internet cafes that are located in other parts of the world. And some of our competitors use those because it's their only option to not use us, so that they are afraid that we're going to take their data. That's it. That's the only thing, is fear of us stealing their data for some reason. And every day I try to figure out a way around that question.
I mean, it sounds like there's still an education gap, as with most things in esports. I mean, it's even people who are building LAN centers are not necessarily the most sophisticated technology people or gaming people. I think this is a common theme we see over and over, which is every piece of the industry, there's still an education gap. Doesn't matter where you're looking. So it's interesting though. I personally think it's probably a winner take all market. That especially with the moat you guys have currently, it's hard to consider anything else if you're opening a center. So
yeah, there's big retail chains that we have contracts with that again are the same way of like they have way smarter people than any of us on our team, right? Like really, really smart people. And, so for them, it's almost like checking a box. Like they want us to spin up another AWS instance that they've got the keys to that will just give them the assurance that we're not going to, I don't know, like get hit by a bus or something almost, right? Like, so again, our merger with EEG as a publicly faced company and a much bigger, more powerful publicly facing company than we were as a private company as a whole, I hope will be more assurance for some of those folks that like, we're not going anywhere. Like I wasn't going anywhere anyway, but being a privately held company, it's a little harder to convince folks, right? Like I don't really want to give them our Chase bank account login information, but now I can point them to GMBL, right? Like it's a little different than it was before. So
yeah. William, do you have any questions before we move on to some news here?
No, I think Zach did an awesome job. I think it's time to talk about some news and get Zach's perspective because we had a really busy week for news.
Yeah, there's a few big stories here that I hope we're going to get to all of them here in the interest of time. So let's start with this one, guys. This was a big story, and it was a report that came from Reuters. And the headline here is Netflix planning to enter the gaming industry with subscription-based gaming service. So we had talked on previous podcasts about Netflix showing interest in the gaming market, wanting to potentially get into the gaming market. Obviously, they've done gaming shows. Now it seems to be all but confirmed, at least the rumors seem to come from a very legitimate source here, that they will have an unlimited, essentially, games offering for a monthly fee, as with the typical Netflix subscription, and the only thing else out there really that looks and feels like that today, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, is like an Xbox Game Pass. But this is I found really interesting. And Zach, I know you had, as we were talking before we started recording the podcast, I know you guys have had some interesting thinking around games, like all-you-can-eat game subscriptions. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on Netflix getting into this potentially and how it fits with ggCircuit.
Yeah, so the other one that I think of that LAN centers ask us about a lot is the Ubisoft has like a pass that you can buy that gets a lot of their titles, if not all of them, under one subscription. And so a lot of centers will say, can't we just buy that for all the PCs, right? And then have that for each of the PCs. The one key that I see in all of this is that a lot of these, it's going to be like herding cats for Netflix, right? Like we all know what it's like to try to track down someone at Valve or Steam to work with them on something, right? like, and some of the publishers are easier to work with than others, but money talks, right? Like where the money funnels into the system and the dollar number that funnels in a lot of times is what's going to probably move the needle with some of those publishers. So, my thought is, can Netflix get, I don't know what the price point will be, but 10 or 15 or 20 bucks, can't be much more than that, right? If somebody puts their credit card in, we all know we've got those subscriptions for all the other streaming services. I got 8 of them that are all like between $5 and $12, right? But so that's the magic point. Can you take that from 1 million or 5 million or 10 million gamers to start and get somebody like Activision Blizzard, who are extremely close to chest with their IP, extremely hard to work with for bigger projects like this. Like you got to go sign one of those publishers, the hardest ones first, right? And go to market with them. Yep. So that's the biggest thing for us. We've also done stuff in our network where we've made Battlefield available on licenses working with EA to all of our LAN centers in the network where they didn't have to buy the game. The players didn't have to buy the game, and they just went to a LAN center, launched the game and could play. They would be like, ggCircuit 102 would be their player name, right? And then the next time they log in, they get a different one and somebody sold their armor or whatever. And like, eventually they get frustrated and they buy the game. That's the whole purpose, right? So we've done that before. It's technologically not a problem. We've dreamed of the day of being able to do that, but we've always ran into problems at the publisher, always. Like, And we've got great contacts and great friends there. And they're like, there's no way we're getting this by our attorneys. That's always where it gets stuck.
I mean, it makes so much sense, Zach, for you guys to bundle with your software, right? Like an all-you-can-eat subscription so that the centers don't have to worry about that. I guess, William, my question for you is, to Zach's point, is there a price point at which you think Netflix will be able to get all these publishers on board? Because we've seen this happen with music and movies, right? And the first ones to do it, like Apple, was notorious. Steve Jobs, I think, had to practically, beg and plead to get all these music publishers sort of on board with Apple Music originally. And it was not easy, especially being the first. What do you think Netflix will hit a reasonable price point here? And do you think they'll be able to get all the publishers under one roof?
I have so many thoughts about this. It could fill a podcast by itself. So I got to be focused here on a couple things. I think I first want to talk up. I'm not super bullish on this working for Netflix. And that's a hot take. It is not because I am not bullish on a game subscription model. It's not because of that. I'm extremely bullish on it. I'm not saying Netflix can't make it work, but I want to do the pros and cons column for them. The pros are pretty simple. They have basically everybody in the gaming demographic in most countries already subscribed to Netflix. Like, I'm guessing if you're 18 to 30 years old, you have a Netflix subscription right now. That's why they're making the Witcher TV show for Netflix. It's because they know you, they know their audience, you're there, right? So they have a massive, instantaneous ability to put this offering in front of people and convert. And because they're going to get great scale, I'm pretty confident they can get a great price point for this, right? Because they're going to be able to rely on a lot of users signed up in the beginning. And if they have the scale to negotiate a good price point for movies and TV, right, they'll probably be able to get a good price point. Games, I don't think we're talking, I don't want to speculate on pricing, but I think the pricing will be competitive, whatever it is. So I think that's massive pros. So why then, William, would you say, well, you're not super bullish on this? You're not like, oh my God, this is a home run. It's because of two things. One is, I think everyone assumes Netflix will win in their new markets because Netflix was first in the movie market, TV market, right? Netflix is not first here, right? Like, and in particular, I think Game Pass as a competitor cannot be underrated here. Cannot be underrated because once you have one subscription feature for this, I dispute that this is like movies and TV. We're going to end up signing up for 4 or 5 subscription services. I think you're going to have one baseline. You're going to cherry pick the other titles and games because that's still the offering that's based on here. So I have real concerns about the entrenchment of their competitors, but I have a bigger concern here. And the bigger concern I have is for me to go, oh my gosh, they're going to knock this out of the park. This announcement would have to be paired with Netflix opening games studio. Because Netflix has shown us that the secret to their sustained subscription model is owned content, right? That's why they spend literally billions of dollars developing content every year. And I find it difficult to believe. That after, say, Microsoft has just bought Bethesda, right? And walked all that stuff exclusively as a carrot to their platform, that all these other publishers who are thinking about their own platforms and what they might do might let the crown jewels out of the fence for a subscription service. And I think if you see what's happening with Netflix right now with like Disney clawing back IP to build Disney Plus, I think the gaming space is more advanced and there's much more friction for them here that they realize. And without their own individual offerings to anchor, I think they'll have a really great hit out of the gate with probably some expensive, highly paid marketing titles. But I think the ability to sustain is really questioned. I also... Sorry, is this? I want to go one other place.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I also want to connect this to the person who should be most terrified by this announcement. And I think this is an unusual draw, but bear with me. I think if I'm a company that's most scared about this, it's Epic. And why? Because I think Epic just invested tons of money and is planning to continue to invest tons of money in a store model, right? And my concern is if this is at the moment where we now have a Netflix coming in, we have Game Pass, that maybe the store model is really going away, that the subscription model is the new model for games and game services, and that the biggest people who are at risk here are the new store models. They're going to have all the difficulty of building the store business, but they're going to be on last generation's monetization approach, right? Like, I think maybe seeing this, Epic Games might wish, hey, we should have launched as a game streaming service or had streaming elements integrated into it.
Hey, William,
Because
what if we think about this? I love that point, because here's what I think secretly behind the scenes. Okay. This is your data play, right? Like somebody like Valve and with Steam, or somebody like Epic with their store, they have all this data and they know this. I would argue that Epic already has a subscription model. All right. You know where I'm going with this? Because they already know they can sell a few games, right? They sell a few games during the year. They know your login and they know what you will buy, but they also have been giving away games the whole time. And I don't see any sign of that stopping. So essentially, like what they're doing is saying, okay, right now, William buys like a couple games a year, divide that by 12 months. We give away a bunch of free games along the way. We pay all those game companies for those games. Essentially, I wonder if under the hood, that's what their model is. They're just monetizing it we'll give you some free games along the way to keep you in our store all the time. You buy a few games. Essentially, that's what you're doing, right? As long as you're logging into the Epic store and spending some money every now and then.
yeah, I see the point. Just the concern is, the positioning here is like, if like Netflix entering this market because they have so much market power for exposure to customers, right? Like literally anyone who games, like I think we've all heard subscription service for games before, because I remember when like subscription service for games has been around for a long time. People are always like, you should do a, like I remember when there was like, was it like GameFly or whatever, where you'd literally get like the, so like, I think we view it as I think Netflix can bring a lot of attention and reinvigorate that model and show that model makes sense today. And my concern is if you're Steam, you're fine. You're the entrenched ownership store. You locked in, you've amortized your costs a long time ago. But if you're Epic and you've just spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars building a store model, like imagine if I were trying to convince you that like I should be doing an online DVD or an online video purchase website today. You would say to me, no, there's Amazon. They rule that market if you want fixed own content, and everyone else is on streaming, right? And I'm taking that thought a little bit and applying it to the games market where, no, there's Steam. They own the main market for people on ownership. There's the entrenched collections in there, and everyone else is going to go to streaming now. And I really do think streaming is coming, or not streaming, subscription models are coming in a big way because of the success of Game Pass. I just think the industry is awake to it. They recognize how impactful it is for Microsoft. And like, it's difficult to get going and it's difficult to get right. But I really believe that it's not just Netflix seeing the power of this. And more to the point, Netflix doing this is going to scare other people into doing this, right?
And Paul, using your moat analogy, is it also a problem that a generation or two we've lived in Steam, right? Like our games exist in Steam, and that's why Epic has started their store to compete with Steam. Is that like I don't want to ever lose my Steam account, because like what happens to all the games that I have in my Steam account? And now
what happens to my 5,000 unplayed titles? What about World of Goo? I've been looking at that
exactly.
one.
What about Civilization 2, right? Like that's still there for me to play if I want. So,
you can't leave Civ 2. That's a classic.
Look, I've always said that the more of these stores that pop up or services, and it's no different in video. If anything, it's worse for the consumer, worse for the gamer, right? It just like I now have to check because I have so many subscriptions just for games, even, right? I have Game Pass. I have 300 titles on Steam. I have all the freebies I got on Epic Game Store. So like if I have a friend that says, "Hey, let's go play Left 4 Dead," I'm like, "Hold on, do I own that? Did I get it for free? Is it on Game Pass?" I have to go do like a whole search, and I'm the Origin. I pay for like the Origin Premiere or whatever, and the EA Play and the right. So like between all these services, it's just a mess, and I think it's nonsense that it's such a mess. But I just want to push back on William's point for a second, which is I think Epic would be able to pivot to an all-you-can-eat service because of their relationship with the developers, right? I think that's the crux of those all-you-can-eat services.
Can I tie it into the operating system? They own Unreal. And I've equated ggCircuit to Unreal for folks in examples like, listen, like underneath the hood, a lot of these publishers use the Unreal Engine, right? So yeah, is that part of their secret sauce?
And where I think I push back even harder, William, is on the Netflix doing original content. Because I think you're right. That's the obvious one, right? Netflix does original content for movies. It's very successful. They do it for TV shows. It's very successful. They spend, I don't know, now it's more than $1 billion now a year producing original content. I just think if they wanted to roll their own all-you-can-eat game service, and we all agree the hardest part of this is convincing the developers to come on board with their games. If Netflix in the same breath says, and by the way, we're buying this studio and we're going to spend $3 billion a year making our own games. If I'm Activision Blizzard, I'm going, whoa, hold on. You want to put, Overwatch 2 next to, and Call of Duty next to whatever game you're spending $1 billion on? No way. Right? And so, like, I feel like if anything, Netflix staying out of the original content space might allow them to bring this to market more successfully. Now, that's not to say 2 years from now or 3 years from now, they then can't roll their own content once all the developers are dependent.
That argument, Paul, I think is a dead argument. And I hear you, but I think like that's the argument. Like if that argument were true, then why did Netflix go into original content, right?
But they didn't do it day one.
No,
that's my point.
They didn't do it day one. They didn't do it one. But my point
and neither did Apple.
Neither did Apple.
Because you don't want to be seen as a threat. So you ease your way in. You're the friendly guy consolidating everything. Mm-hmm. We all work together, kumbaya. And then 3 years in, once you have all the eyeballs, then you roll your own.
See, the difference is, and I take the point, right? You're basically saying like it's, I take the point. The thing is, I think the fundamental problem here, is all the, like in that market beforehand, right? The market that you described beforehand, like all the individual TV studios, all the individual video movie studios weren't really trying as a core piece of their strategy to do their own distribution, right? But look at now every publisher you just talked about. Tell me all the services you subscribe to. Tell me, like, it's just the publishers recognize that the distribution here, because it's a much more fundamentally core digital product, right? Like they never went through the same, like they've recognized like the industry had an awakening before traditional media where they shed the pain of having to go to a GameStop to go buy a physical, GameStop, but they shed the pain of having to go to a retailer to buy, like, online. They got there earlier and they recognize controlling that distribution is powerful. That's exactly why now you have the publishers going full on at it and trying to distribute other people's games like Epic. So I just think like role play the conversation with me. Like your Netflix, I have BioWare's, I have Fallout 5 or whatever it is. Convince me to put Fallout 5 on your service.
Right, but here I'm gonna shoot you both down because I'll give you
ahead, Zach.
The other night I really wanted to watch Indiana Jones. I just had a hankering to watch it again. Okay.
Great movie. Which one though? Which one?
I was just going to start at the beginning and start watching.
First one. Oh my God. Yes.
I'm assuming they're all online, right? So I do what everybody does. All right. And follow me out here. I open up Netflix and I like, nah. So then I'm like, screw this. I'm not going through everyone. So I get my Google out and I Google it and I'm like, oh, it used to be this, used to be this, used to be this, used to be this. Now it's on Paramount Plus. Well, guess what? Zachy Poo is not subscribed to Paramount Plus yet. So my point is, I think Netflix can launch this and be successful without all of the publishers on it, because in the end, like there's not a one fix all video streamer out there today anyway. Like we all subscribe to at least 3 or 4 or 5 different services because the IP's spread around. I don't know of a day where all the IP exists under one thing, because that's called a monopoly. And so like I don't know that is a good thing anyway. So
But let me make this argument more, because I'm struggling. I think there's a good point here, which is like the risk here is like, think of your Steam library again, right? And think of like I'm for everyone, right? Like it's like 3% of your Steam library is like 99% of your time played, right? Because you're like, you play the big marquee games, you buy others, you try them, you're like, yeah, not really, I'm not really feeling Crayon Physics this time, maybe right? But like the point I'm making is the risk. I don't doubt Netflix can get gaming content, but if they're just getting all the games you don't want to play, really, they don't have a great service. And my fear is, and I'll make this argument differently, our industry has recognized the power of exclusivity for decades, starting with consoles, right? Like that's what defined, like there's this notion inherent in the industry of exclusivity and platform control. And again, unless they're able to get the biggest games you're not going to want to subscribe to the service. I don't believe this is like the movie or TV market where there's a massive amount of long tail content and tons of people want to go back to 90s, 2000s, 10s. I think for subscription gaming to work, most people pretty much want to play the most recent games. And that's the difference here, right? That's the stuff that gets carved out to other studios in the media model.
And I'll support that, William, with data from our system is that we have games, like we have 2,000 titles in our library across our network, right? Like there are centers that have loaded libraries of all the classic games you could want to play, and they don't get played. And we all know that, right? Like you all are like, let's go together to that new retro bar down the street. They've got an original Nintendo. We can blow on the thing. It'll be so cool. And we'll sit down and like, it's really cool for a night. Like the other night we pulled out GoldenEye and we just really wanted to play it on the 64. And like, it was a great experience. We might've had a few adult beverages and like, but like, I didn't have the urge to pick it up again the next night.
All rockets, all remote mines. Like,
right. Like the slappers only, which is slappers only. Like, yeah, I mean like, Golden Gun, like all of those are great. And we all love thinking about that meme, but playing it, like I was frustrated. I was like this is not playing like I play Fortnite, right? Like I wish I could crouch and build and do some other stuff that new games can. So I think you have a great point in the fact that gamers want to play the latest and greatest.
Where are they going to get the good content? Because you can't rely on you can't rely on the long tail content the same way you can with traditional movies and film. You just can't. Like everybody, I bet if I told you, do you want to watch the best picture? Like I bet there's a big market for people who want to watch the last 10 years of best pictures. Yep. I don't think there's anybody really in gaming who wants to go back and play like Fallout 2, even though it was a brilliant game at its time. They're on Fallout 4 and the market for Fallout 2 is very small. And guess what? It's GOG, right? Good old games, right? And I think that's a good business.
That is a great point. That's such a good point. And music, you look at music's the same thing, right? Music's timeless, even more than movies, right? Like,
what did Netflix, what did Apple start with? It start like their big thing was getting the Beatles on, and that's like 50, 60 years old, you know? But again, can you imagine if I was like, well,
I'm going thumbs down on Netflix streaming. I don't think it's
we have Oregon Trail. Like, guys, we got Oregon Trail. Like, that would be the equivalent, right? You know what I mean? And like, everyone would be like, oh, Oregon Trail. I remember that was a great game.
I used to love this game. I used to play it for hours, and you're like, okay, an hour or two for nostalgia.
It's not the long tail content. Game's not the same. It's the big new content that anchors services. Yeah. And that's the stuff the publishers protect. And that's my concern. That when they have a big marketing budget out of the gate, they'll get a partner, they'll buy a couple big things, right? But the ability to sustain this is going to be a struggle. It's going to be a real struggle. And I think they can get eyeballs and I think they can get awareness for this market. I think subscription games will be a more important category going forward. Now, I think this might galvanize the category, but I have real concerns about their ability to do it. I really do. Again, I'm not saying they won't do it. They have the biggest advantage ever, which is literally every single person who is a gamer will know about this on day one because they'll log into their Netflix account at night and see an offer for it because Netflix has that demo. So that's a huge advantage. But content is king in these industries, and I think the content here is not a one-to-one parallel with movies and TV.
Guys, I want to move on. I want to get to one other story here. Before I do, I just want to say for our listeners, for our viewers, I would love to get comments from you guys, A, on what you think the price point for this Netflix service will be, and B, if you think they will be able to get the AAA titles, the latest and greatest, and if that is something that you would need to see to subscribe to this service. I would love our listeners' views on those two things.
Come by the live stream and vote Team Netflix, Team Notflix. Like, I'm really curious.
There you go.
Like, yeah.
Guys, let's get to this last story here. We have to mention this because it's another big story this week, and this is Valorant Mobile being announced, and in conjunction, the PC version hitting 14 million monthly players. Huge numbers from Valorant, and Valorant Mobile coming out. I mean, everyone knows how big of a fan I am of mobile games. Zach, let me start with you. Just two questions here. One, how much does the mobile space in some ways hurt you if you see it like that at all? And two, where is Valorant, based on the data you have from the centers, like where is Valorant in this hierarchy of popularity in terms of what people are playing?
Yeah. So interesting fact is that in Southeast Asia, a lot of our centers run PUBG Mobile in an emulator in their PCs where the players can use a keyboard and a mouse. And like, it's like a pretty popular title there. And in our overall network, it's not very high,
Yeah.
but like, it's strange to know that players will like, can you imagine an upscaled mobile graphic? I mean,
It's sort of
but
cheating also, playing
it's
against guys
absolute
who
cheating,
are
and they
on-
win pretty easy because
Yeah.
they have controls different, right? So
Yeah.
that's interesting. So the mobile market to us, like we have seen that when you talk about LAN centers, like what do you go there for? What's the purpose, right? If the player just wants to meet up with their friends and play a certain title, like PUBG Mobile has taken some players out of LAN centers, especially in Southeast Asia in the market for us, because a lot of them have cell phones now. They don't have a PC, they don't have high speed at home, but PUBG Mobile is pretty good. So I expect Valorant Mobile to be very popular. And again, we pulled this up before we talked, we knew we were going to cover this subject, but it's very interesting to me. League of Legends it's been a mainstay, an evergreen title in LAN centers for years and years and years. And, people push it up a little, push it down a little bit. It'll pop back up again. But, for last month for us, number one played was Fortnite, number two, Counter-Strike, number three, Call of Duty, and then fourth was Valorant. It's bumped League of Legends down to number five. It's a pretty big deal for us that, Riot's second title is vaulted above its original gangster. So, I'm excited for it. It's competitive. It's fun to watch, like they're doing a good job of pulling those players in from other titles like CS and Overwatch. Enjoy that game a lot. So, yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. And I anticipate to keep climbing. I hope they feed it like they feed their League of Legends games with enough content and activities like they've done. So, yeah, William, what you got?
William, I'm curious, like specifically for you, because, we've been over this mobile conversation a million times. A, do you think the mobile version here potentially hurts or cannibalizes the main game? And B, like, what's the Riot secret here in your mind, right? Like the fact that, to Zach's point here, it's already past League of Legends in across all these centers. Like, what is their secret sauce here, right? They seem to have fallen on like the ability to create competitive games in a way that no one else can and drive real success and player.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I want to say two things. One is I love that they're doing mobile. I just think accessibility is the most important thing. I think people who are scared that mobile cannibalizes or places, I think it gets customers you otherwise couldn't get, and it's an on-ramp for customers you otherwise wouldn't have, right? I think it's wonderful. I think high quality mobile offerings for very good games should exist because many people can't play very good games, on PCs, right? Because they just don't have access, right? So I just think it's smart. And if you think of Valorant as something maybe more than a game, sort of how Riot seems to be thinking about League of Legends with music and things like, well, this is better. Get your brand in front of more customers. Why not? Come on. So I think it's absolutely and the fact that they're following it this fast tells me they had this in development for a long. Riot didn't just start this when Valorant launched. It was like, oh, we should have a mobile. Like they've been doing this for what? That's smart. They have a strategy. They've recognized it needed to work from the get-go, right? Or at least from much earlier in the development cycle. So I love that. Yeah, I think the bigger concern for Riot here a little bit is where are your users coming from, right? Because what's freaking me out in the stats that Zach shared is I would think Valorant would knock out CS. I would think Valorant would knock out Call of Duty. What was the thing that dropped on the slots? League of Legends, right? And it's anecdotal. We're talking about, center data that Zach has chosen to share with us and other things, but that's a little concerning to me if I'm Riot. Because Riot's whole approach has been, we're going to get competitive gamers in every different genre. What if they're just getting competitive gamers and they were just going to the competitive titles? So you're in the worst pace possible you are with Valorant. And I'm not saying this is the case, but it's got to be in the back of it because obviously there's incremental consumption going on here. But you're actually just pulling your users out of one title into another. You had people who love competition who probably would have preferred a shooter, but we're doing MOBAs. And now, so that is the thing that really is, making me prick my ears up when Zach's sharing those numbers is this is weird because I think that the titles this is aimed against, it's not knocking down, it's knocking down the owned home title. And that's that goes to a bigger concern. So you're talking about how great is Riot that they can do this and achieve. Let's not understate their achievement. This is incredible for anyone to launch a shooter like this and have it get to this level of popularity this fast. That is like, I mean, only a true AAA publisher could do it, right? Particularly with a new IP. This is absolutely an unbelievable achievement. But it may not be all roses and wine here, because I wonder if it has, like, that's the point essentially.
I wanted to bring up sort of an anecdotal point that Zach has sort of disproven. But I had this theory, which was we pick a game, and this is my own personal experience, right? When I have time to play something and I get in my Discord server, the way we decide what game we're going to play is not based on which game we want to play. It's based on, okay, there's 5 people online, let's play Valorant. Or there's 3 people online, let's play Apex. Or there's 10 people online, okay, we'll play customs 5v5 Valorant, right? Like, and so a lot of it's driven by just like the numbers you have, because these are social activities now. But the fact that, a 5v5 game replaced or at least surpassed a 5v5 game, I'm like, maybe my theory here is disproven, because to William's point, Valorant should have replaced CS:GO.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, it's a tricky one, but I love the theory. And I do think it's important to think that maybe, and this is a little bit of simplification, but maybe we're so quick to categorize games by genre, right? But like, you don't really categorize film and movies the same way, right? Like, you're not a romantic, like, you might prefer rom-coms, but no one says like, oh, I'm an only rom-com watcher, right? Like, if there's, I'm never, like, are you kidding me? I would never watch a Best Picture film.
I've heard William say that. He's only
that's right. Yeah, documentaries. Like,
so.
You consume the media much more broadly, and yeah, you might have preferences. Like, of course, you prefer rom-coms, like Harry Met Sally all day. Come on, stream it up, But like, the point I'm making here is like, yeah, maybe what's going on here is a deeper customer segmentation of users than the cursory approach we're taking here, and it's a little bit concerning to me. Maybe there are just Riot style users and Riot can reach them, and they certainly seem to have reached more with Valorant. But then what does that mean for the next title? Because there's only so much more. There's only so much of that type of consumer out there.
But this is, to me, where like being ggCircuit's kind of so cool, right? Because you could probably figure out if there's any truth to my theory here, right? Like, you could figure out when groups of X number of people come in, what game do they play most, right? And is there any correlation between size of the group and game preference?
Yeah, the fun part, Paul, about ours is in our network, besides like a Best Buy kiosk where they're playing, and they're limited to 15 minutes there where it's free, everybody's paying to play.
Yep.
So people are precious with their gaming time if they're paying $3, $5, $8 an hour, depending on where they're at in the world, to be in one of these centers. So our data is so pure, because I'm not going to mess around with a game I don't feel like playing if I'm paying $5 an hour to play it with my buddies, right? So, yeah, it's very interesting to look at our data and get a lot of that. And again, not to pour salt in an open wound, because I know you guys have talked about this in the past, but it makes me sad, because I feel like the real loser in all of this is maybe Overwatch, and I hate that, because we really changed the way the world views esports with what the Overwatch League did, bringing in like big names. And again, underneath the hood, like, a lot of us know a lot of the details, and it doesn't matter what the details are. For someone who's been doing this since 2004, like, the world looked at our business differently when I went into meetings and talked about gaming and esports after the Overwatch League added folks like the Craft Group, into talks. So I just hate it, but it also proves a point that, man, are gamers fickle, right? Like, you could put together whatever you think will be long-term, but next thing you know, there might be a Fortnite popping out that just makes your Overwatch thing.
Yeah, you are right. The saddest casualty in all of this is like arguably the most, and I would agree with you. I would actually go so far as to say I think the most important game for the evolution of our industry is Overwatch. It is sad to not see that in your top 5, Zach. It's sad,
It's ninth.
Oof.
Ugh.
Here's
And
here's
Heroes of the
great
Storm
one.
is
Call
8,
of Duty
right?
Black
8.
Ops. Call of Duty Black Ops is 7. There's 2 Call of Duty games in my top 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well,
And again,
let's
you
hope.
guys, we don't know this because we kind of know it in the LAN industry, but all of us as gamers, and like we have a United States or America view of things that we don't see around the world as what titles are popular, right? Like I always use Dota as an example. Like it is massive in other parts of the world, especially South America, and it is not very popular in LAN centers in the United States, right? Like,
Yep.
but it's a massive worldwide title, so I don't know. It is sad, but I'm excited for Valorant, right? Like I'm excited that a new game is creeping up into the top 5 and sustaining it. And I hope they feed it, right? Like that's
Yep.
the biggest thing is I hope they keep feeding it.
Guys, that wraps up this week's podcast. Zach, thank you for being an amazing guest, for talking about ggCircuit. Congratulations again, by the way. And if any of our listeners, viewers want to find you or find ggCircuit or find your centers, like who can they follow? Where can they follow you, or where can they follow your businesses, I guess?
Yeah, luckily we're very easy to find because there's not many other ggCircuits out in the world. The hardest part is you just got to figure out how to spell circuit. It's been my company name forever and I can't remember how to spell circuit. So we're on social media everywhere, YouTube and things. You can find us. If you want to reach out to me, my name is my email. It's just Zack, ZACK @ggCircuit.com. Feel free to shoot me an email. If you got any questions, I love it. Like we love to talk shop, man. It's what we do. It's what we've done every day for 17 years. So
very cool. Very cool. And such amazing insight. William, thank you as always. Great to have you back this week. And for our listeners, don't forget, go buy the book of Esports on Amazon. Go give it a great 5-star review on Amazon. Also, if you've read it, if you've bought it, you've read it, you've loved it, show William some love there. Make sure to go buy some Business of Esports merch. Don't forget also our live stream every Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Every Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And go follow us everywhere. Subscribe to us on YouTube at The Business of Esports. And we have an Instagram, a TikTok where we're going to be doing a lot more content. Twitter, it's all at Biz Esports. And as always, guys, we will see you next week.